A Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder, Chapter 19, Part 2. Look, Hannah! Andrea sounded insistent. See all the footprints on this carpet? Hannah looked down at the carpet and saw footprints in the deep pile. You're a genius, Andrea. If you hadn't mentioned it, I might have trampled right over them. Follow me and keep to the sides of the room. Let's see if we can find any footprints in front of Max's desk. Hugging the wall, Hannah moved forward until she was even with the front of Max's desk. Andrea was right behind her, and Hannah pointed to the tracks in front of one of the chairs. There, that proves someone was in here with Max. And we know Max was here. See those marks from the wheels of his chair? I see them, Hannah acknowledged, and then she pointed to another series of tracks. But I'm more concerned about those. Andrea studied the indentations in the pile of the carpet. They're going right to that door. The original dairy. Max must have taken his visitor in there. We'd better check it out. Why would he take someone in there? He told us that he used it for the storage of old records. Hannah explained. Come on, let's see if it's open. With Andrea following at her heels, Hannah pushed open the door and found the light switch. She gestured toward the shelves of file boxes lining the small brick building. I guess he's still using it for storage. Is that the original safe? Andrea pointed to the old safe in the corner. It must be. It looks old. Hannah walked over to examine the safe door. It was standing open, but it didn't look damaged in any way. Max must have opened it for some reason. As Hannah searched through the contents, she kept up a running commentary so that Andrea would know what she was doing. There's no sign of a robbery or anything like that. Here's a bundle of cash and a jewelry box. Hannah snapped open the box and looked inside. It's a pair of gold cufflinks. They look like antiques. Maybe they belonged to Max's grandfather. And here's an antique pocket watch and a man's diamond ring. Here's a Rolex too. That must be fairly new. I don't think they made them when Max's father was alive. I didn't notice any kind of a safe in Max's house, so I guess this is where he keeps his personal valuables. Her eyes were drawn to a few stapled papers on one of the shelves, and Hannah reached out for them. Here's a speech that Betty typed for Max, just sitting on top of these files. Max must have picked it up from Betty's desk before he came in here. Hannah set the speech aside and opened one of the files. There were legal papers inside and it looked like a loan agreement. Her eyes widened as she read the name. I found the loan papers that Norman's parents had signed. They're stamped paid in full and Max initialed it. Hold on a sec. Let me look through some of those files. I want to see if there's anyone else we know. Here's one from Frank Burcham. Hannah glanced at the contents of another folder. And his papers are stamped foreclosed. The Burchams moved away about 6 years ago, didn't they? Andrea didn't answer, and Hannah frowned. Andrea, you knew the Burchams, didn't you? They lived right next to the fire station, and Frank used to own the lumber yard before the Heddens took it over. Do you remember when they left town? There was no answer, and Hannah turned to see what her sister was doing. Andrea was standing near the door, and she seemed rooted to the spot. There was a glazed look in her eyes, and she was staring off into the far corner of the room. Andrea? Hannah walked over to take her sister's arm. She gave it a gentle shake, but Andrea didn't seem to notice. Scaring me, Andrea. Talk to me. But Andrea didn't say a word. She just shuddered and stared off into a far corner with an expression of horror on her face. Hannah swiveled around and looked in the direction of her sister's fixated gaze. No wonder Andrea was speechless. There was a pair of feet sticking out from behind one of the shelves of the file boxes. Stay right here. Hannah realized how unnecessary that warning was, but she couldn't think of anything else to say. I'll go over and check it out. Even though Hannah expected the worst, the sight that greeted her was still a shock. It was Max, and he was on his back. There was a hole, very similar to the one she'd seen in Ron's cozy cow dairy shirt. in the center of Max's chest. His eyes were wide open and staring up at nothing, just as Ron's had been. Max was dead. Hannah didn't need a doctor to tell her that. The blood on his shirt had dried thoroughly, and Hannah assumed that he'd been dead for quite a while, probably since shortly after his meeting on Wednesday morning. Hannah walked back to her sister and took her arm. There wasn't any pleasant way to tell her. It's Max, and he's dead. Let's go and find Bill. Bill. Andrea managed to choke out his name. Right. Come on, Andrea. I'll drive out to the accident scene and we'll find him. How about Tracy? Do you need to get home to her? Andrea shook her head. It was a jerky, almost automatic kind of motion, but Hannah was relieved. At least she was responding. With Lucy, overnight, at the farm. Good. Hannah understood what Andrea was trying to say. Lucy Dunbright was Andrea's friend, and her daughter Karen was Tracy's age. Tracy was spending the night with Karen at the family farm. Hannah glanced over at the safe and made one of her snap decisions, the kind that frequently got her into trouble. This was a crime scene, and all of Max's papers would be taken as evidence. Hannah knew that she shouldn't touch anything, but Norman had told them how embarrassed his mother would be if anyone found out about the loan papers they had signed with Max. Their loan had been paid off more than 5 years ago. The date was right on the papers. It had nothing to do with the crime, and there was no reason why anyone else had to know about it. It only took a second to grab the file and stuff it inside the front of her jacket. Hannah collected a flashlight, and then she went over to take Andrea's hand. Come on, Andrea, we're leaving now. Andrea was in shock, and the sooner they got out of here, the better. Hannah pulled her into Max's office and guided her around the perimeter of the carpet and out the door. They walked back the way they'd come, across the large open space and out the back entrance. Hannah led the way to her Suburban and opened the passenger door. She tucked Andrea inside, walked around and slid in. Eat another cookie, Andrea. Hannah plunked the bag on her sister's lap. It'll help. Andrea reached into the bag and took out a cookie. She stared at it for a second and then she took a bite. Hannah started the engine and drove out of the parking lot, turning into the highway and heading for the interstate. Bill shouldn't be that hard to find. She could hear sirens in the distance, and all she had to do was head toward the sound. They'd driven about 5 miles when Andrea made a strange, chortling sound. Hannah turned to stare at her and reached out to pat her arm. Just take it easy, Andrea. I can see flashing lights up ahead. We'll be there in a minute. Andrea nodded, and then she made the sound again. Hannah realized that it was a chuckle, and as she listened, it turned into a fairly normal-sounding giggle. What is it, Andrea? You're not getting hysterical on me, are you? No. Andrea giggled again. I really do feel much better. I hate to say it, but maybe you're right. It could be the chocolate. Chocolate helps. Hannah stated her theory again about how the caffeine and the endorphins in chocolate calmed the nerves, heightened awareness, and provided a sense of well-being. And then her thoughts turned to Bill and how furious he'd be when she told him that they'd broken into Max's house, searched the dairy, and found Max's body. Andrea, Hannah turned to her sister. I think I need a dose of my own medicine. Hand me one of those cookies.